You go and learn from the football teams that win, and you don't learn from the football teams that lose. In the same way, in development, you go and study the development of countries that are growing economically and not the ones that are not growing economically. I think that was a very thoughtful presentation by Professor Zondi, and I think he's right that in a short space of time you can't touch on all the subjects. And you're right that that Asia faces lots of challenges, environmental challenges, migration challenges, identity challenges, and the challenges don't go away overnight. But the question is only whether or not any of these challenges are in many ways derailing the forward momentum of the Asian societies. And so far, as far as I can tell, the growth story in Asia carries on in a fairly dramatic fashion. And certainly there are, as I mentioned, as I considered myself, there are geopolitical challenges, there's multipolarity in Asia, and we got to manage that. But, so far we've had no major war in Asia since 1979. So that's already 46 years of no major war in Asia. I mean, no major interstate war. And by contrast, all the major wars are taking place in Europe. And as you know, I just published a piece in the magazine Foreign Policy about 10 days ago, saying the time has come for Europe to realize that it is becoming geopolitically incompetent. And by contrast, Asia is showing more geopolitical competence. And so in that sense, I would say if you watch how pragmatic and careful the Asian countries are, I think we can handle many of the challenges that Professor Zondi brought out very well in his remarks. Thank you.
In your intervention, Prof. Kishore, there's something you have not mentioned, and I know you've written about it for a while now. So in your contrast of what's happening in Europe and what's happening in Asia, and you make reference to their geopolitical strengths. But what you didn't mention is this thing, which is what we have spoken about for a while now, and I decided to put it here. Is in one of your conversation, you asked this question in a conversation in Shanghai with Zhang Weiwei. You made this argument that China succeeds because of government, India succeeds despite of government.
India is a very, very different society from China. I'll give you one example. They say that China succeeds because of its government, and you documented this. India succeeds despite its government.
The question, therefore, is it possible that somewhere in the middle of the story of this success, as you speak about, that is the issues of state capacity, and you haven't made a reference to it yet. I mean, I know it's a subject you write a lot about. Is that part of the foundation that will pivot Asia to win in the 21st century as opposed to other countries and other regions in the global south?
Well, I do speak about how to promote good governance. And, one of the things I say that there is a secret formula from Singapore, which I share free of charge to everybody. And the secret formula is called MPH. MPH doesn't stand for miles per hour. MPH, M stands for meritocracy, where you choose the best people for government and makes a big difference. P stands for pragmatism, where you are willing to learn from other countries and copy practices from other countries. And H stands for honesty. So any country that can implement meritocracy, pragmatism, and honesty can succeed. And what's interesting is that I spoke with Zhang Weiwei probably in the year 2017, almost 8 years ago, when I was in Fudan University within 2018, I think. And it's interesting that since then, India's government, as you notice, has become far more stronger under, as you know, Prime Minister Narendra Modi. His government is driving development very, very, very strongly. So actually, what both China and India share in common is very strong leadership and very strong governance that is helping their development. And that's why most people are optimistic for the future of China and India.
And where does this leave Africa, in your view?
Well, I think it's I think good for Africa to do what Asians did. We were happy to go and learn from the Western countries, learn the pillars of Western wisdom, and apply it to our countries. Of course, you've got to adapt everything to your own country. So, for example, the rule of law in China is not the same as the rule of law in the West, but nonetheless, some of the principles are applied by China in the rule of law. So in the same way, I would say it's good for African countries to copy Asian countries and go and learn from the West and learn from all countries in the world on what can be done. Because right now, you can see very clearly which countries are succeeding and which countries are not. So it's very simple. Just like in football, you go and learn from the football teams that win, and you don't learn from the football teams that lose. In the same way, in development, you go and study the development of countries that are growing economically and not the ones that are not growing economically.